Thank you. I'm going to be showing some slides that have quite a lot of information on them, so I welcome you to email me if you'd like a copy.
Das Überlebensradar.
Mayday, Mayday. Hello, can you hear us? Can you hear us? Can you... Over. We are sinking. We are sinking.
Hello? This is the German Coast Guard.
We are sinking. We're sinking.
What are you thinking about?
So the serious point here is that what we think determines what we do, determines what innovations we might bring into the world. Now, the official definition of innovation, I think, is actually wrong. I'm not going to read these points. You can read faster than I can talk. But very importantly, just because something's new certainly doesn't mean it's innovative. I'm sure we can think of lots of silly examples. Innovation, instead, should be defined as the creation of new value. And it should be measured in terms of return on investment. But value isn't just about money. Sure, what we're willing to part with our pounds for is a reflection of what we value. But it's actually what goes on up in this thing, this most complex structure in the known universe, that determines whether or not we perceive or experience something as being valuable. So it isn't about the money, it's much more about the love. And in fact, if you think about it, we only ever experience value in relationships. Whether it's a relationship to a glass of water when we're thirsty, or the squeeze of lemon, or the pinch of sugar in it, or the person or company providing us the experience. So we also only ever get to deliver value in relationship to other people, to things, to processes. So what are you doing to create value? Now, this is a survey that gets published by the UK government every couple of years on innovation. This particular snapshot was a couple of years ago. I'm not expecting you to read all these numbers, by the way. I just want to make a very quick, simple point, which is that lots of small businesses don't even try to innovate. You know, or they say, well, we did it once, well, we don't need to, we're coasting. You know, but I'll draw your attention to the upper right that shows that size matters. And I'll drive that point home by sharing the fact that all major corporations think innovation is incredibly important. And in fact, all of the 759 CEOs surveyed by IBM in this particular survey said that innovation was in fact the key part of their job. I want to draw your attention here only to the bottom few points. This is again from the UK study, and it shows that not a lot of external focus is happening. So these companies that are trying to innovate aren't doing market research to get insights. They aren't doing external R&D. They aren't looking outside the four walls of their organization enough. Back to the IBM study, we see that looking outside is recognized as being vitally important. Getting out of the four walls. However, it's interesting that although 3/4 of the CEOs surveyed said it's vitally important, only half do it, and they say they do it only moderately well. We know from the MIT Innovation Lab and my colleague there, Eric von Hippel, that a lot of the best innovation is done by users. Now, if you look at innovation in medical instruments, for example, it's typically surgeons who are first to bend and tweak their scalpels, not the manufacturers. There are lots and lots of kinds of innovation that is, like looking outside, is network innovation, or so-called open innovation. But it's just one of many, many kinds of innovation that we talk about. So the point of open innovation is we can't afford to sit on our butts and wait for good ideas to come to us. We've instead got to get out of the box. Most really good R&D doesn't come from inside R&D organizations. Sure, that's where the stuff gets built, but the insight, the idea, very often came from a user or customer or out there in the field. So we've got to get out of the boxes of our own heads and out of the boxes of our organizations. We've got to build idea funnels that are as wide as we can, because the only bad idea is the one that doesn't get expressed or the one that doesn't get heard. So we build the funnels wide so we get lots of ideas from lots of surprising places. But then the other key lesson is that the really good innovators are extremely good at killing good ideas quickly. Okay? That innovation edge is because they squeeze the funnel tighter and quicker than most. So they stop spending effort and energy and time and resource and thought on ideas that ultimately aren't going to go anywhere. So they kill the good ideas and focus on the great ideas that are going to build the gold bricks, the value in the enterprise. Back to the IBM study, another final point they made is that in business model innovation matters the most. But what is a business model? Very fancy term. It's actually just how we deliver value. It's the process of delivering value to our customers. And in fact, I think value delivery model is a better term because it embraces government agencies that are trying to innovate and deliver value. It embraces charities. Okay? Any organization that's producing something, the product, that's intended to be of value to someone. So that's the core element of the business model, or the value delivery model. The other elements are, of course, how do you make it, and how do you get it into the hot little hands of your intended customers? So business model innovation is really all innovation. In my view, all these other types of innovation we talk about are just, in a sense, examples of the three core types of innovation, which together make up a value delivery model. Here's an example of a company that we all know is innovative, and here's their production in China. Okay? They're some of their products. And of course, they have very innovative ways of getting us to buy their products. They have consultants rather than salespeople in these Apple showrooms. One type of innovation I don't believe in is accidental. Sure, lots and lots of great examples of wonderful innovations that happened because of accidents in the lab. Okay? But the fact is that after the accident, then the hard work starts. And the process of taking an idea into successful reality is, in fact, very difficult and fraught with a lot of failure points. By the way, 87.3% of the statistics that I'm going to show you, I'm just making them up. But roughly speaking, these percentages translated across various MIT Innovation Lab members, 3M in chemicals, Nortel Networks, where I worked, in telecoms, and so on. But the fact is, innovation is very difficult. This particular study by Doblin Group goes into a lot more industries than this, and they found that across all industries, success rates were less than 10%. Of course, VCs are not an industry, right? But what that shows is that even with a dragon perched on each of your shoulders, you still have a less than 1/3 chance of successfully manifesting value in the world through your innovation. So it's pretty depressing, isn't it? And that was true across all industries. Lots and lots of studies on what specifically goes wrong. Again, I'm not expecting you to read these. I'm just trying to weave the story. But one of the key problems in innovation is what I call technology push. It's because the innovators the R&D people, the engineers, the technologists, basically come up with solutions and then throw them over the wall and say, would somebody in marketing or sales go and find the person with the problem and figure out what they're willing to pay for our solution? There are lots and lots of reasons why innovation fails. And again, this is one of the slides I'll be glad to email you if you want it, because I'm not going to read through it now. But it can be summarized with one word. These are all relationship issues, whether it's the ultimate rejection that the customer says, what were you smoking when you came up with that idea, so-called innovation? But these are also issues of leadership, and they're issues of strategy. What is strategy? Of course, it's just the art and science of leadership, including leading innovation. It's all about creating advantage. What organization can't create advantage through developing innovation capabilities? Strategy, of course, has structure. There are lots and lots of different pyramid models around. This is mine, and I've just borrowed it from all over the place and adapted it over the years. But basically, you start with a sense of purpose at the top. It can be very simple, and that's why it's a pyramid, less complex and less often need to change at the top, all the way down to really implementation where the rubber meets the road. I call it culture, though, because that's where the behavior and the mindset and the melting pot of human psychology takes over and determines how we perform or fail to perform. And of course, strategy has high-level, long-term aspects and short-term in reality. It's also a process. So this is the same elements of the pyramid, and simply show that as we get down into implementation, we may need to revisit things. We may realize we're not achieving our objectives, and therefore we need more resource. Oops, we don't have more resource. We need to revisit our goals. So it's really about driving or flying or sailing your business. And it's also, hopefully, about enjoying the journey. But let's not forget, it really is about winning. Whatever war we're fighting, whether it's a war on terror, a war against ignorance or poverty, or a friendly little game of world domination in a particular industry. I offer this framework for bridging between what I call the soft stuff, the psychology, the mindset, and organizational culture, and the hard stuff of strategy and results. Organizational DNA, that's in a way the dance between individual psychology and mindset and the psychology of teams when we throw ourselves in a pot and become a culture or a stew or soup. In the book, I talk about the 7 sins. I'm just going to go through and give you some quick examples. Again, happy to share these slides with you. But I also want to quickly point out that Steve Jobs' 7 secrets of success relate, though not surprisingly, not in the same order. 3M's pillars of innovation relate to these elements of strategy, again, in their own unique order. Google, of course, has to have 8 pillars to the others 7, but again, they relate to the 7 elements of strategy and the 7 sins of innovation. This model sits behind it, really all about how these elements of strategy need to be driven or addressed strategically by leaders in order to drive innovation. That's the point. Innovation doesn't happen by accident. It needs to happen through strategy. So let's look at a few examples. The first sin is not having any purpose or having a pointless purpose. When I first joined Oracle to get involved with their corporate social responsibility initiative, we were giving away hardware. We were giving away computers to needy schools, and Oracle employees were donating their time and crawling around desks and hooking people up to the internet so kids could learn more effectively. We realized that was actually silly. We're not a hardware company, we're a software company. And so we got everybody together, went through a process. I highly recommend you all try this. get everyone in your company or your organization to sit down and write their thought about why your organization exists. Then put people in pairs, 4s, 8s, and so on, and do a big mashup and see what you come up with. I've spoken with lots of CEOs who say, no, I don't want to do that. That's too scary. I want to tell people why we exist and what their purpose is and what they're meant to do. But I always make this guarantee. If you allow your people to do that, you'll come up with 2 mission statements side by side that will look almost identical, only there'll be a very important difference. One of them is owned by everyone and everyone feels passionate. We did this in the Education Foundation. We came up with a new mission which was about connecting kids globally so they could do online collaborative learning projects and build websites, and ran this program called ThinkQuest, which I had the pleasure of being the global champion of for 5 years. Also very important to look at alignment. When you get people talking about the mission, not only get them to define the reason your organization exists, but also what are they there to do, right? How do they support that mission, right? And get people talking. It's a wonderful process, and it leads to a lot of ideas and potential innovation. Looking at the next one down, vision. So not having a vision, not having a sense of what you're trying to do is a key sin. And vision can be impaired in any number of ways. You can be short-sighted, long-sighted, blind. There's lots of specific issues. But fundamentally, vision is about having a dream. And it's about having a dream that's audacious enough in terms of making the world a better place that you should be really excited about it, and that other people will want to get involved and help make it a reality. But dreams also have to relate to reality. There's no point in coming up with an idea, right, that is impossible for you to implement. Also, another key point is that your plan should have structure. Right? Which of these ramps would you rather try and run up? And absolutely, again, require focus. Give you a quick example of a chemical manufacturing company, mid-sized company that up in Manchester, that basically wanted to globalize, got me in to help them develop a commercialization strategy. But they were really trying to do everything. They wanted to form a JV in China. They already had one in the Middle East. They were looking at the States and breaking in there. And basically, I convinced them not to try and do everything. Right? Because the point is, if we try and do everything, we're not going to do it. We're not going to do it well enough. The next sin is miscommunication in all of its wonderful forms, whether it's through apathy or whether it's just that we're bad communicators. Here's an example, point about marketing. Right? If you can convince someone or get someone to understand the health benefits of drinking this, its value goes up in their minds. Right? So you've instantly made something more valuable. You've innovated. Right? So marketing people, get out there and innovate. Of course, there's lots of key things to communicate, but the key thing to communicate is value, and there's various aspects. I often say value is a multi-sided coin. And we've got to be clear in our communications, right? How many of us waste unbelievable amounts of time on emails because instead of just being able to reply and answer the question, it's not even clear what's being asked? The next sin is disengagement. I'll give you a quick example here of a company where the MD, when he first came to me, said, look, I've got a fabulous team, everybody's hitting their objectives, I have no reason to complain, our owners are happy with us, they're a subsidiary of a multinational, we're hitting all our sales targets, but I'm not happy. Right? I'm discontent. I feel we could be doing better. Can you help? Right? Of course, the doctor in Dr. Dave is, I'm a shrink, so of course I can help. Lie down here. In all seriousness, all we did was get the leadership team together in the boardroom, series of discussions, we looked at some psychometrics and so on so that people could understand each other better, but More to the point, 6 months later, he said, our sales have shot up 21%. We know we're in a flat market. So what's that? The Dr. Dave magic? I couldn't claim to have done anything to drive their sales up. But when we looked at it, we saw that actually what had happened was that the leadership team was now talking together differently, more, but also differently. They were challenging each other, so there was a lot more creative conflict. There was a lot more, why are you doing this? Why not that? And as a result, there was improved communication, better cohesion among the leadership team, and in fact, it had trickled down into the rest of the organization. So there was less of a silo mentality and way of working. And because of that, because they were in a very complex industry where they're basically selling on an OEM basis to manufacturers who use their components, they were winning more business because the customers who would typically talk to the finance director and the commercial director and the sales director and so on and so forth was getting a more consistent message rather than slightly inconsistent messages. So buyer confidence had increased and they were selling more. So that's an example of how improved engagement can drive innovation. This chart illustrates the point, again, based on learning from the MIT Innovation Lab, that the better you get at engagement, the bigger you build that innovation zone, the greater opportunity you have to innovate, to manifest new value. I love the quote, nobody knows who said it originally, so I've stolen it, but the quote was, if you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much space. And I've adapted it a little bit here, but I love it because we have to be on the edge in terms of our thinking and our actions to drive innovation. So the next sin is all about leadership. So if we have created a culture with no leadership, then we can't possibly be effective. And traditional top-down leadership, command and control, is not the way to go, obviously. If leaders flip the paradigm and say, you aren't here to serve me up on top of the heap, I'm here to serve you. I'm here to serve everyone in the organization and shoulder responsibility for everything that happens throughout this organization, things change. One of the things that changes is, of course, leaders realize they'll be crushed under the weight of that pyramid, so they try and encourage other people to be leaders at all levels in the organization, to pick up some of the weight, to assume responsibility, to be empowered. It's just a mindset. When that happens, the whole thing tends to flatten over time as well. Another key point about leadership, of course, leadership, in my view, is in terms of innovation and in terms of strategy, is all about responsible empowerment of resources. So it's all about making sure that innovation teams and everybody involved in innovation have the tools and the time, including the attention from senior leaders, in order for them to be successful. And that often involves very timely decisions. This illustrates a learning from the MIT Innovation Lab, which was that if there was a 6-month delay in a go, no-go decision in terms of whether we're going to invest in driving a particular innovation, a 6-month delay typically killed the business case because it doubled the development cost and it halved the market impact. Okay? It doubled the development cost because people wandered off, you lost all your best developers, and so on and so forth, and also things just tend to get more expensive anyway. And it killed your business case because ultimately it meant you're missing a key part of the opportunity market window. Uncreativity is the 6th sin. Just to illustrate that, again, it's all about having a wide funnel, and it's all about what you do with those ideas. It's what you do with them when you throw them in the mixer and connect things together. Again, an idea might be a really crappy idea on its own, but if you bolt it together with another idea, they might together become ultimately something that grows into a gold brick. This is an example. My next door neighbor has a sailboat, so of course he's my best friend. And he said, hey, look, if you'll come into my surgery one afternoon and just facilitate a little discussion, I'll give you lots of free sailing, right? Great. So I went in. I could immediately see the problem they were having. They had these sessions monthly, ideas, brainstorming, let's come up with good ideas, but it was all being dominated by him, very talkative, very, very energetic individual, and a couple of the other doctor partners. And the receptionists and everyone else were sitting there, when is this over? Couldn't wait to get out. So I asked my friend to shut up, right? And asked a couple of other people to shut up over time and just listen. And then we got everybody talking. And to make a long story short, in the process of talking for about an hour and a half, this group of about 35 people came up with ideas for innovation. They excitedly ran down as soon as the meeting was over and reconfigured the waiting area to make it friendlier, instead of everybody sitting around on the edge looking at each other saying, why are you here? And even more interestingly, they empowered the reception staff to actually hand out emergency appointments. Okay, so previously they'd have to take the person's name and number, the doctor would call back and so on. They changed that. And it led to measurable improvements in patient satisfaction and also employee satisfaction. Now, this is a happier NHS surgery, just as a result of a discussion that led to some ideas for change. Finally, in terms of our culture, the worst thing we can do is be complacent. To think, oh, well, we innovated once, we don't need to anymore. Or, we're actually great. Aren't we great? We're fantastic. There's no room for improvement here, right? Those are both forms of complacency, whether we just think we know we're not good enough and we don't care, or we think we're fantastic and couldn't possibly be better. So a quick example, pardon me, was a London-based company, SME, where the owner was absent and had been for years. She founded the company. She ended up putting a friend of hers in as the MD to run it. And she basically ignored it and had a very nice lifestyle as a result of all the profit that was being generated by the business. But she also felt a little guilty that she had sort of ignoring it, and she knew it could probably be better. So she asked me if I could help. Of course I can. And I went in, could instantly see that the MD needed to not go, but he needed to step aside and do what he was good at, which was selling, and let somebody else manage the business. And we got rid of a couple of non-performers, which of course sent a shockwave through the business and said that we care now. We do care how this business performs. Got some new people in, and fundamentally created a different culture, right? Created a different stew. We didn't empty the pot and then put a new stew in it. We just started adding ingredients and taking some ingredients out and mixing it and stirring it. And the bottom line is that within a few months, the business had a totally different vibe. And interestingly, serendipity, this business owner, woman, got a call saying, I've just been offered 10 million for my business. What should I do? I said, don't say no, but don't say yes. Let's look at your options. Let's consider. Make a very long story short, 6 months later, with further investment in the people and improving the business and its performance, she did sell the business, but she sold it for 50% more to a different buyer who actually had a better strategic reason for wanting to acquire that business than the other buyer who was just a competitor. Okay. So it's an example of how culture is incredibly important. And here's my favorite team in any sport, in any realm of sport. And aren't they a fantastic culture? Right? They have just such an incredible mindset that says we can't lose. And I was at the game in Dublin when the clock had stopped and they had the ball and they won the World Series then, as they just did. But this is an example of how mindset, individual mindset, bridged to the rest of the team and culture creates unbeatable advantage. So you can Google me. I think I'm right in saying that if you throw in Dr. Dave and either innovation strategy or my surname, that I come up somewhere in the top few. I don't work at Microsoft, by the way, although I am a mentor on the Microsoft Ventures program. Instead, I work with organizations and help them develop innovation capabilities. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear your thoughts on my thoughts. I'm around for the break. Be very happy to take any questions, although I don't think we have time for it now. And I look forward to connecting with you. Thank you.
Okay.